Hi, my name is Yannic Meier. I'm from the University of Duisburg-Essen. I'm very, very happy to be part of this conference. And I'm going to present now a study I conducted together with my co-author, Nicole Krämer. We developed and validated a new scale measuring people's general science skepticism. So we observed that many studies that were investigating science denial, which can be defined as a rejection or unreadiness to accept scientific evidence, were focusing on specific subject areas. For example, the denial of vaccination effectiveness, denial of COVID-19, denial of global warming, or denial of evolution theory. However, some of these studies also showed that there's certain commonalities behind denying these and further claims. So, for example, politically conservative people were found to be more likely to deny these claims, while people with a higher general trust in science were more likely to accept these and other claims. So other researchers are saying that there are several studies focusing on general trust in science. However, there's actually a lack of studies focusing on negative aspects like distrust. So we concluded that there might be some underlying commonalities of denying scientific claims from various subject fields, and we focused on science skepticism in the current study. So we searched the literature of how to define skepticism, and we found several definitions of, for example, media skepticism, ad skepticism, or political skepticism. And we, described skepticism as a generalizing belief characterized by doubt, mistrust towards instances such as, as I said, news media, advertisements, or politics. And this leads to questioning or rejecting statements or even motives of persons associated with these instances. And we further then defined science skepticism, which was also based on some qualitative research studies that found certain psychological mechanisms of how people reject science skepticism. So we defined general science skepticism as people's universal doubts and mistrust towards the methods, results, and independence of science, and towards the motives and honesty of scientists. So we see we proposed multiple factors actually here. So we developed a set of 25 items on 5 subscales, which we termed general doubts, or skepticism against or towards the motives of scientists, skepticism towards the results and methods that are used of scientists, skepticism towards the independence of science, for example, from political influences or economic influences, and skepticism towards the honesty and completeness of communication of scientists. We conducted 2 studies. Study 1 was an exploratory study where collected a convenience sample of 185 participants. And the second study should be a confirmatory study. We conducted a representative sample regarding sex and age of the German population, and we had a sample size of a little bit more than 1,000 participants. So what did we find? So we conducted actually 2 exploratory factor analysis in both studies, and we see that the commonalities of both studies are very large. So we see that there are only 4 differences in items there, and those commonalities also show that items load on the same factors in both studies. Also, we see that the portions of explained variance are about the same, and also the means are very much the same, although we have to say that we measured the scale on a 5-point scale in study 1 and on a on a 7-point scale in study 2. So this is why the means differ a little bit. We calculated an exploratory factor analysis then with the 2-factorial solution, and we saw actually an excellent model fit, and we also saw that both factors have a very high internal consistency. What we also see is that both factors are very highly correlated to each other, which is why we concluded that both factors can also be measured as one mean score. So they can be used as one mean score, and both factors don't have to be separated from each other, which we also validated through other correlational analysis. So for these results now, we use the mean score of all remaining items. So what do the two distinct factors measure? So factor one actually measures skepticism about the motives of scientists and skepticism towards the used results and methods. So for example, there are items like I find scientific methods questionable or scientists act against the interest of the common good. Factor two, on the other hand, this has a skepticism about the independence of science. So, for example, from economy or politics. And there are items like I doubt that science is completely independent, or I doubt that scientists openly report all of their findings. So there's also a little bit of skepticism towards that scientists reveal all of their findings openly. So next we aim to assess the criterion validity, and one of the major claims of this study was that general science skepticism would be related to rejection of scientific claims from multiple subject areas, and this is also what we actually found. So we found that people with a higher science skepticism were more likely to reject the harmfulness of COVID-19, the harmfulness of tobacco smoking, the safety of genetically modified food, of evolution theory, more likely to deny climate change, were more likely to be open to alternative medical practices, deny effectiveness of vaccinations, and to deny the safety of the 5G mobile standard. So we also see that there are larger differences in the effect sizes here, but we see that in general, people who were more likely to be skeptical towards science were also more likely to reject those scientific claims and consensuses. The next aim of this study was then, so these are the results of the large study with a representative sample. So the next claim of this study was to investigate how general science skepticism would be related to different constructs that are usually measured in this field. So we see here a pretty large negative correlation between trust in science and science skepticism. Also a negative correlation between trust in science journalism and science skepticism. People who were more skeptical towards science were also more likely to be dissatisfied with the political system. They were more likely to have a high conspiracy mentality, and they were politically rather oriented towards the right spectrum, and they were more likely to be conservatives. So we see here hints that people who are skeptical towards science can be located in one specific political area. So finally, another objective was to show that actually trust in science and science skepticism would not only be like the same variable, but also only reversed, but that they are actually two independent and distinct variables. And therefore, we calculated a multiple regression analysis using the collapse score of the scientific claims as the outcome variable. We controlled for socio-demographic variables, and we see that both trust in science and science skepticism share their unique portions of variance with the acceptance of those scientific claims, which shows that both variables can actually be seen as distinct factors, which makes it important to also study both factors separately of each other. And we cannot only rely on trust in science and make conclusions about science skepticism. So let's sum it up. So we found that the questionnaire we developed was all the items were clustering among two factors. One factor summarizes as general doubts towards scientific words, mistrust towards the whole scientific process, and also towards the motives, so the intentions of scientists. The other factor can be described as skepticism towards the independence of science from politics, economics, or also ideology, and also skepticism that scientists report all their scientific findings openly. Importantly and interestingly, the mean value of factor 2 was quite higher than the mean value of factor 1, which indicates that most people do not are not skeptical towards the whole scientific process itself and towards the motives of scientists, but they're rather skeptical that science is not really independent of politics, of economic interests, and they may think that scientists, that research agendas are shaped by politics or economic interests. So next we saw that science skepticism was generally related to a high conspiracy mentality. People were more likely to be politically dissatisfied with the German political system, and they were more likely to be politically right than left, and more likely to be politically conservative than liberal. So this indicates that being skeptical towards science could be incorporated in one's social or political identity. So some possible future directions could be to investigate the reciprocal relationship between science denial and science skepticism. So what causes what? So what comes first? So probably it's a reciprocal relationship, and denying science leads to higher science skepticism, and then science skepticism leads to higher denial. But this is an open question for the future. Another question could be to study which media formats people who are skeptical towards science use, as they were found to be more likely to distrust or to have a low trust in science journalism. So do they use alternative media formats, for example? And also what could be remedies against science skepticism could be something for future studies. So some limitations are that the results could have been influenced by social desirability bias, that results are probably shaped by the German cultural influence of the political system here, and also most of the results are of correlational nature. So we've also published a preprint of this study already. So if you're interested in more details about the study, either we can talk about your questions in person, or you can read the preprint. So I'd now like to thank you very, very much for your attention, and I'm very curious about your questions.